The summit meeting between Presidents Lee and Trump, extended nuclear deterrence, and now nuclear submarines. All this and more next on The Impossible State. North Korea is the impossible state. It's a place that stumped leaders and policymakers for more than 3 decades. It has a complex history, and it has become one of the United States' top national security priorities. Each week on this show, we'll talk to the people who know the most about North Korea. Welcome to another episode of the Impossible State podcast at CSIS. I'm your host, Victor Cha, President of Geopolitics and Foreign Policy at CSIS and Korea Chair, also Professor at Georgetown. Today we're going to be talking about the recent summit meeting between President Lee and President Trump. Some surprises came out of that summit for sure, including discussions of nuclear submarines. And we're taking advantage in particular of having some old friends and colleagues with us at CSIS today who are here for some discussions and analysis about the summit as well as nuclear deterrence discussions. Dr. SHIN Beomchul is currently a senior research fellow at the Sejong Institute. He was formerly Vice Minister of National Defense and also served as a senior research fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies and a tenured professor at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Kang and I were just talking about how the best job in academia is senior research fellow, not president, because president you have too many headaches and too much administrative responsibilities. Dr. Kang is president at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Previously, he was Dean of Planning and Assessment at the Korean National Diplomatic Academy. And in 2012, he also served as president at the Institute for Foreign Affairs and National Security. So also a lot of academic leadership, but also a lot of academic administrative work.
That's right.
Yeah. It was better when we were younger and just tenured professors, right?
That's right.
Anyway, it's great to have you both, two good friends here with us at CSIS on the Impossible State podcast to talk about the summit meeting that just happened between President Trump and President Lee. I know how it was covered here in the United States, but I just wanted to get both of your thoughts on how, from a South Korean perspective, the summit meeting was seen overall. Of course, this preceded APEC, and the president left before the
APEC
formal
summit, yes.
APEC festivities started. But how did their meeting go in general, in your opinion?
My opinion, I think it was better than expected. Because actually, before the actual summit, Koreans were really concerned about what kinds of deal we are going to make with the U.S. administration on tariff, because actually U.S. was quite demanding on South Korea, $350 billion investment annually, about $20 billion per year. That's too much. But actually, tariff deal was made, both sides satisfied. And then, actually, the other side, what kinds of issues will be discussed, especially on the security side? Before that, it was about the nuclear cooperation agreement between the U.S. and ROK-1 to 3. At the time, I think there's Koreans were talking about we need to have our own indigenous capability of enrichment and reprocessing. So that was the thinking. But actually, it turns out to be one of the tariff was relatively good, mutually acceptable on both sides. And also, of course, we made a big progress on the shipbuilding cooperation. Of course, there is another surprise after that. And then, actually, nuclear-powered submarine issue was not expected at all. Suddenly popped up. And the nuclear, actually, initially, President Lee Jae-myung asked, we need to U.S. help in securing the nuclear fuel for the nuclear-powered submarine. And then President Trump said yes. And the next day he said, build nuclear submarine in the U.S. That was a big surprise. So lots of details must be ironed out from now on, how we are going to build, where we are going to build it, how we are going to build, how we are going to sustain that. But overall, I think it was better than expected, especially on the tariff side. And also this opened up new chapter on the nuclear cooperation between the two countries. That's one. But on the other end, unfortunately, I was a little bit disappointed. We have not touched upon any kinds of ROK-US modernization program or how we are going to strengthen the ROK-US allies in under the different security environment at all. So we have both leaders did not have any talks on that. Because we have not seen the fact sheet released yet. We have to wait until we see the joint fact sheet on the summit. So all speculation going on.
Right.
Still, it's 2 weeks after that, after summit. So still we are waiting. And also the SCM has not released a joint statement. Unlike a previous SCM, the usually joint statement came right after the SCM, but still they are waiting. So I'm wondering what kinds of things going on behind the scene between the two countries. That's the concern I have at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Shin, what did you think of the summit?
I have almost the same view with Dr. Che. So it is not proper to having these two persons at the same
We are in
table.
the state,
But,
not in
let me put it different way. I can summarize the summit with 3 words: interesting, and satisfied, and with some concern. I think this summit was very interesting. I worked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs 3 years. But whenever we prepared the summit, I think we all prepared before the summit. So summit itself is not interesting. Sometimes it's very boring. But the summit between President Trump and President Lee, it was very interesting. As we all noticed, President Lee suggested the idea of a nuclear-powered submarine in front of public. That's very interesting. And the President Trump responded with his social media that I approved that. No, it's kind of very interesting. Second word, satisfied, as Dr. Che mentioned, that I think we have some concern about got the deal with regard to tariff, but it's relatively good to summarize the tariff. But last one, with some concern, as Dr. Che mentioned, we still have some problem in detail. That's the reason why we do not see the fact sheet. I think we can solve that kind of a problem as an honest manner. Without that, there will be some doubt whether our alliance might face some problem in the future. So I think right now we have to solve that kind of problem to ease the concern.
Yeah, I mean, as you both mentioned, it's quite unusual. We've had the August 25th summit here in D.C. Then we had the summit between the two leaders in Korea. And then directly after that, the SCM. And we have not seen any official bilateral joint document yet.
No.
Usually, I was quite surprised after the August 25th meeting here in Washington, their first meeting. That's usually when you see a joint statement because it's the first meeting of the leaders. And they lay out the program for the two governments, for the next period of time. But we haven't seen any of that, and there's probably a lot going on behind the scenes, as you said, that we're not really aware of. The only thing that we've seen really written that has come out has been the President Trump's tweets. And so we have this, as you mentioned, Dr. Shin, on Truth Social, President Trump put out this tweet just after the summit where, of course, he said, if we start from the middle, our military alliance is stronger than ever before. And based on that, I have given them, meaning South Korea, approval to build a nuclear-powered submarine rather than the old-fashioned and far less nimble diesel-powered submarines that they have now. A great trip with a great president of South Korea. So can we start by there's been a lot of speculation since then, but can you start to explain to our viewers what do we know of this nuclear submarine? It's hard to even call it a deal at this point, but what do we know so far about the nuclear submarine? You mentioned that President Lee asked for this and President Trump apparently said yes, but then put this out on social media. Aside from this written statement, we really don't know much about this at all.
No, only the thing we know about, because actually why South Korea needs to have nuclear-powered submarine was explained by President Lee Jae-myung clearly. Because our diesel submarine is not sufficient enough to trace the North Koreans and the Chinese. So actually, that actually surprised me. So he specifically mentioned Chinese. Yeah. Wow. And then after, there's no explanation. But actually, in his meeting with President Xi Jinping, I was told that he explained it's not, I don't know, Ambassador Wee Sung-nak explained that it's not specifically targeted to the Chinese submarine, but it's targeted any unspecified the submarine in and around the Korean Peninsula. So actually he diluted it a little bit, but actually President Lee Jae-myung said that because we need to have a capability. Of course, previously South Korean Navy argued for the acquisition of a nuclear power submarine. Once, because actually North Korea, once it has nuclear power submarine, once that nuclear power submarine leaves the port, it is not possible to track or locate and destroy them. So we need to have 24/7 or maybe longer period underwater to monitor this port area and to follow them. So that's a rationale. But North Korea has not acquired nuclear power submarine. There is the signs that North Korea wants to have it,
Right.
with the provision of Russian technology as well. But still, so that's a kind of, and also there's another dimension. There are two dreams South Korean Navy has pursued all the way up to. That's one is a nuclear power submarine. Second is the aircraft carrier. So actually that's one of them. But I don't know, I was really surprised President Lee Jae-myung mentioned that. So initially, as I said, we thought about the enrichment capability and also the reprocessing capability we like to have for the commercial use, not actually for the military use. Before that, we clearly stated, it is not about the kinds of, for the indigenous nuclear armament program. It's about this purely civilian reason to have this. Even with the revised 123 agreement, South Korea is allowed to have enrichment or the all the way up to the below 20% with the consent of the United States. So there was a lot of debates and discussion about that before summit, but nuclear powered submarine, I was really surprised. Maybe he's in a better position than me in explaining why nuclear powered submarine.
We need why?
Yeah.
Oh,
Because
that's
you were in
yeah.
the Ministry of National Defense.
But before this administration. But anyway, it's a long story. The South Korea military wants to develop nuclear-powered submarine, starting from the Nomuon administration, and we probably do several suggestions to U.S. government, but unfortunately, it was rejected. As described by President Lee, he mentioned that in first term, probably President Moon Jae-in suggested that kind of idea, but did not get a positive response from the United States. But this time, that's why I think, I assume that President Lee Jae-myung openly suggests in the public about the nuclear-powered submarine, which make President Trump very difficult to refuse, because this time we have a lot of invest to the United States, and since President Lee Jae-myung mentioned in public, President Trump got some sort of a pressure to approve the kind of a suggestion. So I think it's a proper approach. The necessity of a nuclear-powered submarine is because of North Korea's nuclear capability, and then we have a good partnership with the United States with regard to extended deterrence. But considering South Korean capability, we only focusing on the conventional capability. But although we have a strategic command in our military, but we do not have a strategic asset. So I think there's some necessity to build a strategic asset. That I think that the biggest example is nuclear-powered submarine. On the one hand, there's a certain distinction. Many people misunderstood the South Korea's intention of a nuclear-powered submarine as a kind of a nuclear weapon-loaded submarine, SSBN, but that's not. We just want to seek SSN.
In addition to that, actually, one example actually forced South Korea to push for the acquisition of nuclear-powered submarine. That was AUKUS agreement between U.S., UK, and Australia. Why Australia is allowed to have a nuclear-powered submarine, which is provided by the U.S. and UK, but not South Korea. Why? So there is kind of some South Korean felt kind of discriminated by this Western powers. It's about only the Western allies got together to share their technology. Why not? South Korea is one of the fine example of U.S. allies in the world, why we are treated unequally. So there was another kind of emotional response on that scene. So maybe President Lee Jae-myung said, oh, this is my opportunity to raise national pride or being treated equally by the United States. So I'm the one who get equal treatment from the United States. So that actually helped him get a higher support level among the public. That's only the speculation. But before that, actually, there was a debate about the difference between AUKUS and the Korea-U.S. alliance.
Yeah. Okay. Let me a couple of things. Let me ask you a specific question about since we don't know the details and we're speculating. So the question of sort of nuclear propulsion technology and nuclear fuel, right? What is your sense of where? So is this going to be something that is provided by the United States? Is it going to be something that Korea develops on its own? This is linked to the revision of the 123 agreement. What are your thoughts on that? That's the first question. And the second question, perhaps Dr. SHIN, in answer to your question about why Trump said yes, if we could pull up the second Truth Social tweet, because the second Truth Social tweet that President Trump put out shortly after the summit was he said that South Korea will be building the nuclear-powered submarine in the Philly shipyard right here in the good old USA. Shipbuilding in our country will soon be making a big comeback. Stay tuned. So that's the second question. Maybe in President Trump's own mind, he sees this as something that's a quote-unquote moneymaker for the United States, and maybe that's why he said yes. But I'd love your thoughts to both these questions. First, starting on the question of technology and fuel.
So it seems to me that the South Korean government believes in its own capability to build big submarine, maybe about beyond 3,000 tons, metric tons. And maybe they are building more 4,500 metric tons of submarine nowadays. So they like to put the turbine in that serve. So technically speaking, they believe they can do that. So only the things they need is a reactor and also fuel coming from the United States. That spanned for the past 5 decades all the way, because there are some suspicions and also U.S. concerned the possibility of proliferation, all these things. We have been arguing for that. So that's why specifically President Lee Jae-myung said, we will build a submarine. We need only the fuel provision by the United States. So the problem, there's still concern about whether it's a highly enriched uranium fuel or the low level enriched uranium. So U.S. submarine uses a highly enriched uranium for their fuel, but the Russians and Chinese are using lower level the fuel. So what kinds of fuel? That actually comes to the issue about whether these kinds of violation of the NPT or not. But technically speaking, I think that's not a violation of NPT, because the provision of the fuel of course for the military use, but actually not attacking the other countries. But it's
not weaponized.
Not weaponizing. So that's possibility. So that actually leads to the issue about who is going to build the submarine. That actually leads to Dr. Shin's answer to that. So I was really surprised, but actually initially we need to have a provision, U.S. provision of nuclear fuel, not building the submarine in the U.S. shipyard.
Yeah. Probably the hottest issue at this moment is which is country we are going to build our nuclear-powered submarine. U.S. wants the United States. South Korean government definitely wants the South Korea. Second one is as we talk about the fuel. I think the President Lee's comment was clear. We need pure support from the United States. I don't know the level of uranium enriched fuel, which is, as Dr. Choi mentioned about the United States used a higher level, which is more than 20%. But the South Korea, whether we intend that kind of a high level or low level is not uncertain. But I think at least 20% of enriched uranium is very proper. In that case, we can ask United States provide that kind of a level of fuel. But it's very hard for South Korea to make that kind of a fuel because we need to revise 1 to 3 agreement, and we need to start to build the facility to enrichment for the fuel. So it's gonna take a long time. That's the reason why President Lee asked President Trump about the U.S. provide the fuel. But another issue behind the fuel is that whether we design and build our own nuclear reactor for the submarine.
Yeah,
That's another question. Maybe United States wanted to provide their reactor together with the fuel. So we have to decide that kind of way. So it is right, Tom, that the devil is in detail.
Yeah.
That's the reason why we have some problem to issuing the fact sheet with regard to nuclear powered submarine. Last, your question, why President Trump? Yes, I think that that's a bright side of President Trump. I see the dark side of dark side and bright side altogether for the President Trump's foreign policy. Dark side is put much more pressure on its ally partner, but bright side is like this. President Trump is not traditional. Probably traditional U.S. president would not put some economic burden to its ally. Instead, he pursued non-proliferation regime. However, President Trump is unique. So I think this is for the kind of opportunity for South Korea to strengthening its capability, military capability with the deal with President Trump. So I think for the time being, South Korea must make a lot of effort to make a deal as earliest manner. So the concrete development of the nuclear powered submarine, because after 3 or 4 years, we don't know the future. So I think we should hurry.
If that's the case, I think we need to build the submarine in South Korean dock, because actually Philly, the shipyard doesn't have capacity to build nuclear power submarine. That's one reason. Second, of course, if they have infrastructure, the problem is like labor, whether they have a skilled labor or not. So whether they can produce enough skilled labor in time, we can build submarine in the United States. If not, I don't think so.
Yeah. So just to sum up this discussion, this was quite unexpected. The notion that this could be built, as the president said, in Philly Shipyard right now, at least right now, doesn't look feasible for reasons that you've just described. Both labor and Philly Shipyard isn't a nuclear certified shipyard. So, and then on the question of the reactor and the fuel, I think probably it's, even though we don't know the details, it's safe to say from a U.S. non-proliferation perspective, they would like to see that provided by the United States, the reactor and the fuel. But at the same time, as you said, going back to August 25th, there's been talk about revisiting the 123 agreement in terms of enriching fuel for civilian energy purposes. So there's just a lot up in the air right now, and maybe that's, as you said, the reasons why we haven't seen the documents. But what it also says, to your earlier point, Dr. Che, is that here we are. We've had 2 summit meetings and 1 SCM, and we still don't have a real statement of alignment in terms of where the 2 allies are on the broader security issues outside of this nuclear submarine issue, as said, on strategic flexibility, on OPCON transition, on defense burden sharing, on China. There doesn't seem to be, maybe there are agreements, but they just haven't been able to surface because of these other issues. Can I ask you both, like, in your view, you are both sort of some of the leading defense thinkers in Korea. Both of you have served in governments, in both progressive and conservative governments. What is your sense of where the Lee government and Trump are on these bigger security issues that came up in Trump 1? Again, they haven't surfaced yet fully in Trump 2. Is your sense that there is alignment on these things, whether we're talking about cost sharing, OPCON transition, strategic flexibility in China, putting aside North Korea for now? Do you see alignment between the two on these issues?
Of course, it's my speculation and hunch.
Yes.
It seems to me that there is no strategic alignment between the two countries. It's only issue-based adjustment among the. Of course, we can say we like to have a value-based, a rules-based international order in the region, promotion of peace and stability in the region, and free and open in the Pacific. I don't see any that kinds of term coming out of this Lee Jae-myung administration as well as from the Trump administration. They are talking of all the issues. Alliance modernization. As I said, alliance modernization, how do you define alliance modernization? Why do we need alliance modernization? Is there any common threat assessment between the two countries? Is there a commonly shared objective in the region in pursuing peace and prosperity? So it seems to me that there has been no concrete kinds of strategic alignment between the two parties. But unfortunately, I have to say the relation between the two countries will be driven by issues like a defense budget, the SMA, Special Measures Agreement, that's burden sharing, or the strategic flexibility without talking about what about the roles and missions of U.S. and ROK alliance. Of course, actually, in the current MCM, there's only statement about this. ROK-US alliance is not only about the peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula, but also the regional peace and stability. That's the things we can rely on about our the prediction of the future direction of ROK-US alliance. So, but still, only one thing is that they like to keep the strengthening the alliance into the future. That's a fact. But more specific strategic objectives, strategic directions have not been clarified yet. So still, as I said, maybe it will be driven by the issues at one point and another point.
Yeah.
I think with regard to summit, we face some problem to hammer out the fact sheet. But with regard to SCM, the defense minister meeting, I think the document is prepared. But we need coordination between the summit result and the ministerial level result. So I think we have to wait about the fact sheet. That's one reason why we do not see the joint announcement with regard to SCM. That's one thing. Second thing is there is some report with regard to this SCM. And then the major defense issue is well discussed. With regard to OPCON transition, I think the two ministers agreed upon some timeline. And the second one is strategic flexibility. I saw the press interview after the SCM, and that time Minister Hegseth mentioned about the strategic flexibility, which is probably agreed above on some level. I don't know detail. And the last one is burden sharing, as you mentioned. That I think that this time the burden sharing is not a big issue because the South Korea promised to increase our whole defense budget drastically. Second one is that there might be a agreement to purchase U.S. weapon system, great amount of money. That's I heard it's $3 billion like that. So I think we already have a SMA agreement last year, so it might be respected. That's my speculation. I wanted to add one more thing with regard to nuclear-powered submarine. I think if we build a submarine as a holistic manner, I think we need flexible. If President Trump wanted to stick to the submarine must build in the United States, and if South Korea opposed to that, we cannot build a nuclear-powered submarine, vice versa. So I think we need a kind of a compromise between the two. We, South Korea, have planned 4 nuclear-powered submarine. So I can suggest two in the United States, two in the Korean, and started it right now. And we can look which one get the result fast. I think that's
we know
kind
the
of
answer to that question.
yeah. So no, my concern is if we delay this decision too late, I think it might be fail. That's my concern. So I think we need flexible to reach the agreement.
Spoken like a true policymaker, diplomat, always finding the gray area of compromise. So,
Yes, right.
let me ask you one last question, since we're running out of time, and we've got to join our friends back upstairs. If you're China and you're looking at all of this, we see talk about strategic flexibility. The U.S.-Korea alliance being about more than the peninsula, being more focused on regional issues. We see the way that the South Korean public has reacted to the 2016-2017 sanctions against South Korea by China over the missile defense system. We see during the Biden administration these decisions by South Korean chaebol on high-end, the so-called small yard high fence items like biotech, semiconductors, EV batteries. All the investment is going to the United States. And now on top of that, we have this, whatever it is, $20 billion a year for the next however many years, or $350 billion in total, in everything from semiconductor chips to nuclear energy, and now we're talking about nuclear submarines. There was always this question of is South Korea trying to sort of hedge between the United States and China? That doesn't look like hedging anymore.
No.
Yeah. Love your thoughts on that.
I think this, if I'm correct, Lee Jae-myung administration emphasized our diplomatic approach toward other countries centered on the U.S. ROK alliance. That's a backbone. Then we can improve our relations or open up a new chapter of our relations with Russia and China and other countries as well. So I think I was really surprised to see that it's really backbone, emphasizing ROK-US is backbone. So that's why. And then what would be the Chinese response? They don't like it.
Yeah.
They like have better relations with South Korea or keep the distant South Korea away from the United States. So what kinds of measures they can take? So Dr. Cha, you're right, because they actually took very coercive measures, coercive economic and trade measures vis-a-vis South Korea. But they also experienced counterproductiveness of those measures. It seems to me that at the moment China will take charm offense vis-a-vis South Korea. So we are better partner than the United States. We are very much flexible and generous, even though you are making more money in trading with us. So we are not asking you to put the investment in China. So we are a very generous country. We are a friendly country. So they're taking the very charm offense at the moment. But on the other hand, of course, with regard to nuclear power, they mentioned about the emphasize this importance of denuclearization of inter-Korean peninsula only. But that's the beginning. They will wait until the concrete result of this summit and what kinds of action the South Korea and the United States will take. And then they can take the other very oppressive measures vis-a-vis South Korea. At the moment, interdependence in our trade relations, of course, intermediate process goods, China is relying on us. On the other hand, maybe if China feels very confident about it, securing their own intermediate goods, not necessary to import from South Korea, and they can use kinds of rare earth material as they did to the United States to cut off or to put the pressure on South Korea. It seems to me that we have to wait. But China would not accept these changing moments or the strategic structure in the region.
Okay.
I think I cannot agree with Dr. Choi more. No, from beginning, I have some concern about President Lee's foreign policy. But in his first visit of Washington, D.C., late August, he visited his
Yes,
dear
he came to CSIS,
and
yes.
mentioned what kind of surprise. It is not a time of a so-called 안미경중, security with the United States, economic with China. It's no more. That's kind of a surprise. And the second summit, another surprise, as Dr. Choi mentioned, that the President Lee mentioned that the nuclear submarine comes from Chinese side. That's another kind of a surprise, which
right.
means that President Lee, at least with regard to security matter, he wants to strengthen ROK-US alliance, which is, I think, very proper. But going back to your question, the Chinese view, I think they probably not satisfied with the current position of a Korean government. So I have some concern of some kind of a pressure. But there's two different aspects of 2016. At the time when China paid a lot of pressure with regard to third deployment. At the time, the South Korea's trade partner, with regard to our trade partner, we got a lot of money from the China. The most surplus trading partner was China. Today, it's not. We got a deficit from China. The economic structure is different. And the second one is China's position in this area. I think China suffer a lot of pressure from United States. At the time in 2016, the Obama administration, I love Obama administration personally. However, during the third economic pressure, United States
Didn't say anything.
Nothing.
Yeah.
That's kind of a disappointment. But this time, since President Trump tried to put a lot of pressure to China, so China's reaction is not that big.
But actually, you have to make it clear that actually President Trump's pressure on China is for the sake of U.S. trade
But anyway,
relations with China,
yes,
but not for the allies and partners.
I agree. But that kind of pressure makes a certain level of ambience that limits China's behavior to pressuring its neighboring country.
Interesting. Well, I mean, so one of the things very clear from this is this story with regard to China is not over yet.
No.
They're in many ways, they're just waiting to see the details of what comes out of the U.S.-Korea agreement, and then they will react to it in some way. Yes, so stay tuned. There's much more to certainly talk about. Dr. Chegan, Dr. Shin Beomchul, thank you so much for joining us on the Impossible State podcast for this really excellent discussion. To our viewers, I hope you enjoyed the discussion. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.